could start by just telling us a little bit about your background and how you came to paint like this.
Okay, well, thanks for coming everyone, and thank you for inviting me. It's a real pleasure to bring my work to your gallery. You've done a great job hanging it. Anyway, my name's Debbie Lee, and I live in Swanage, well, near Swanage in Dorset, and I'm a narrative painter, figurative and narrative, and I trained at Glasgow, and then I went to Chicago, and then I went to the Royal College, and to India, Cyprus, and Australia, kind of following my
dream.
I know, following my dream.
Did you specifically choose those
places? I did choose those places because I'd heard about narrative painters in all of those areas. There's the Harry who come from Chicago, who are interested in comics and outsider art and the narrative, I suppose. And then in Australia, the Angry Young Penguins, a group of figurative painters who are very uninhibited. And what took me up to Glasgow was a strong figuration that was happening up there in the 80s.
So really this figurative painting was something, or drawing was something you'd always done as a child? It interested you? Or?
Yes, yeah, a great fan of Disney, and just always drawing things. And
did you find any influence from comic books?
Comic books, yeah, Disney in particular, and I just had this wonderful art teacher at school who was really kind of focused me on just doing art. I did my O-level and then my A-level, and he sent me to art college to gather a portfolio together for my foundation when I was doing my A-level. So I went to Leicester Poly while I was doing my A-levels and did printmaking every evening. Well, every Thursday evening.
Did you find you were writing your own stories at that time, or were you always looking for inspiration from other people's stories?
I don't think I was doing stories so much. It was just still lives really. And
so is that how? Because I'm struck, and I hope you will be when you go upstairs, that some of your paintings, and certainly the most recent ones, you've used other people's stories and have used that as inspiration for your paintings. But the work here seems to be almost little vignettes, little stories from your own life and your life with your children. Is that closer to what you were doing when you were, in those early days?
Well, it's a good question. So my grandmother was a brilliant storyteller. So she's Irish, and I'm used to a lot of stories from all the family. My father was a folk musician, so there was lots of stories in the folk songs that he used to sing. So I suppose, although I wasn't painting stories at that point, I was surrounded by stories.
So that would explain why, for example, these paintings, which have two people, based presumably on your children, doing various activities, seem to have pictures within pictures that extend the story of what they're doing.
Well, I'm always interested in play and how we develop our relationships with each other through playing together. So a lot of the work down here about family is to do with developing identities, developing a sense of self. And there's a lot of they're psychological portraits, so they're not portraits of my children. They're kind of like a bit deeper than that. So they're not a likeness. They're trying to capture something else about them, and definitely things that they do inspire me to kind of create a picture about it. The sibling rivalry here, the arm wrestling, and over there they seem to be cooperating in the row your boat exercise, although not so much with her evil eye towards him. And they're things that I remember doing as a child, so it's just like reliving some of those childhood pursuits as a mother.
I wondered if you could say something about the levitation.
Levitation is a theme that I often do use, and I've talked to somebody here already about that, because it's something I used to do with my father as a young child, 6 years old maybe, is prepare for party tricks, and he used to say, we're going to do the levitation trick. So he'd put 2 chairs side by side, and he'd get me to lie between them, and he'd move them a little bit apart until I caved in, but I was supposed to stay as rigid as I could so that I wouldn't cave in, and I really, really tried to levitate for him. And I got mixed up with levitate and meditate because I was watching yoga on TV as a child. So I'd go upstairs and practice my levitation, because she often spoke about the feeling of levitating when she was meditating. And then I'd come downstairs, I remember vividly saying, look, watch me levitate, I can do it now, after practicing my meditation so long. But yeah, levitation is quite something. And the picture in the etchings were done when my mother died, and that was a different type of levitation, a levitation of the spirit. So the actual theme of levitating is not only magic and playful, it's also spiritual for me in some ways.
No, they're wonderful images, and I think that capturing such a strong childhood experience for you is obviously something that has carried through a lot of your work. I wonder if you could say something about the triptych that's in the cafe, which I hope everybody here has seen. But if you could tell us a bit about the background to that.
Okay, so I was invited to be an artist at the Royal Scottish Academy, one of their invited artists that they have every year, which was a big honour for me because I had studied up there, and it was a big influence on my work, and I still feel connected with people up there. And but I wondered, well, what on earth can I show? Because I really want to impress them. So I thought, not just one painting will do it, it'll have to be a triptych. So I'll take up more space. So I put a triptych together. And not only a triptych, but I thought, oh, I'm going to place all my new paintings, which I haven't painted yet, on the walls of this triptych and create a gallery. And then, hey, well, being let loose in a big gallery like the Royal Scottish Academy, I'm going to let loose and put the children in the gallery. And I've had conversations with artists who say, there's so many children in the galleries that I can't focus on the work. They're always running about and
making noise.
Making a lot of noise. So I just said, well, these children are just going to be running amok, and all the adults are going to be on their mobile phones looking at the paintings and ignoring them completely. One of them is naked. But most of the paintings on the wall are too, because they are in galleries, like the National Gallery.
Why is the child naked in the last one?
Well, That's a very good question. Now, we don't question that when we walk into churches and see all the cherubs naked, but the idea is that the women are often naked in the galleries, and it's really kind of thinking, like the Guerrilla Girls said, you have to be naked to be on the walls of the Met. And I've got the lampstand lady, which is my print is behind me. So she's standing there. I don't know. I don't know why she's naked. Actually, is she a child or is she a woman? I'm not quite sure.
No, neither are we. Glenn and I certainly have had great discussions about this, and I think every day our views as to why that girl is naked changes. So I guess we'll just have to keep talking about it.
Yeah, I think I will have to keep thinking about it as well. I'm not quite sure, though I do have a painting of Lady Godiva upstairs, and she was doing it for a very political reason.
She was.
So in some sense, there is a political reason behind the painting, but there's many reasons, and it's like an onion skin of reasons. That aren't just personal reasons, but there's a universal narrative in the work, and hopefully a narrative which can spark discussion like here.
That's true. I think one of the things that I've found fascinating in the 2 or 3 weeks that we've had this work here has been the way in which people interpret the work and how very different that is. And I think what I tend not to think about generally with my work when I curate is how very different it is if you put landscapes or still lifes up on the wall to what happens when you've actually got figurative paintings on the wall, that people identify with them and try and interpret them in a way that doesn't happen if they're landscapes or they're abstracts or whatever. And some of the debate can be quite fierce. Have you come across that when you've been showing your work?
Well, I certainly have. I've had it removed from galleries
Oh,
before.
really?
What happened? Well, I've upset people that thought I was painting a picture of them when I wasn't, on one occasion, and on another occasion someone graffitied my work. I don't know why. So I guess it does raise feelings sometimes.
Well, I'm not sure.
Not all of them good feelings.
No, I'm not sure whether I feel better or not better yesterday.
You wait till tomorrow to look at that smoke, innit?
Actually, I don't know.
Well, Lisa got soup over it, so
That's right. But the lady in question isn't here this evening, but we have here on a Wednesday a group who come after Mass at the local Catholic church, and one of them is a retired vicar. She goes because she likes the chapel, not the Catholic bit. And she came in with great glee, I think is the right word, yesterday afternoon, and she said, "I've just come from the top of the town." She said, you're the talk of the town, you know. And I said, "Oh, really?" She said, "Oh, yes," she said, "they're all talking about the naked women and the one with the head under her arm." She said, "I think it's disgusting." It's disgusting, wouldn't have that on my wall. That's what they're all saying.
Which one's the head of the
The one, I think it is. And I don't know if any of you here can recognise the reference, but I think it's the pulling up children.
Oh, raising children.
Yeah. So
Okay.
do you want to say something about that?
Well, it's to do with the child-mother theme, I guess, but there's a big giant at the bottom of that corridor who's pulling up her children from the ground, just like bunnies.
Yeah.
But yes, she's a giantess, and she's actually based on a William Blake etching, which he did for children, the only book he did for children. So if he can get away with doing things like that for children, then I think I can do it.
I think you can too. I think you can.
Yeah.
I think she's wonderful. She has the most amazing expression on her face. So have any of you actually clocked this particular painting?
Yes, that's the one down the end.
Yes, it's the
Yeah.
one down the end there. So,
So that's the monster that people are talking about.
the naked woman.
Oh, glad they thought it was a woman. No, it's
Well, I wanted
It's
very
very,
interesting. A lot of the
distorted.
yes,
Yes.
the female figures seem sort of androgynous. Do you believe?
I think a lot of the figures are androgynous and distorted and manipulated. And so there is a sense of reality in that I might bring in a prop. The clothes might be in my studio, particular clothes that they're wearing, cushion, item of clothing, a musical instrument that surrounds them, so to base it on reality, but I will definitely distort the reality and take liberties with things and change things, altered reality. So they're larger than life and they're real to me, but they're not realistic. People.
Okay. There is one other painting here that a couple actually, that I wonder if you could say something about. One is the girl under the bed, which also seems to disturb people quite a lot. So I wondered if you could say something about the background of that painting.
Oh, right. So that's a hide and seek painting, but it's also based on the experience of my grandmother reassuring me to sleep. So she used to get me to say a prayer. There are 4 corners to your bed. There are 4 saints above your head. So Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. God bless this bed that I lay on. Know it from.
Yes.
I haven't said it for a long while, but but it's also about hide and seek, and she's hiding under the bed from her fears, and maybe she's afraid of the saints above her head, which are all represented by their animal creatures. John is the angel, he's represented by an angel, and the others I get a little bit mixed up. I think Luke is a winged ox, and Matthew and Mark, one of them is an eagle and the other one is a winged lion. Just forgotten which order that is. But it's about hide and seek, so a lot of those pictures are about hiding the children in this chest of drawers. So you're offering containment or constraint by the family, constrained by the family, or the container there, which is the chest of drawers. Under the bed, on the bed is a christening blanket, designed by May Morris, daughter of William Morris, I think, but also not as well known. And so I'm interested in the woman in the background that isn't well known, bringing her to the foreground. The lady and the lampstand is very much about that idea, not a piece of furniture. Here I am, standing tall in my yellow nakedness. But also, there's a lovely story by Charlotte Perkins Gilman, who the woman hiding in the wallpaper. And that's another thing about that painting over there, that it's got this arsenic wallpaper in the background, which is supposed to be very acidic and poisonous, but there's something poisonous about
This is the triptych.
the environment that they find themselves in, those children, and the people on the walls.
Silly question. Is that wallpaper in that triptych, is it printed?
Yeah, it's just printed with a lino cut, so just kind of pushed into
Okay, I've been asked that question several times, so quite nice to know. I guess the last one, well, the other pieces down here that people might have been interested in are the 2 feasts, the Christmas feast and Babette's feast?
Yeah, well, gatherings of people and the nurturing that you can provide for them, I think are very important throughout my life. My grandmother, for instance, nurtured me not only in stories that she told, but also in the food that she provided, a lovely Irish stew. And the prayers that she taught me, I suppose.
There's an interesting, I'm really interested in the way in which you presented those. And you talked about travelling to places because of your interest in narrative painting. They remind me very much of some sort of medieval paintings where you lose, perspective isn't important and everything is presented on a single plane. Was there anything along those lines that had led you to paint them in that way?
Yes, they're more complex narratives where there's a multiple actions are occurring in the same plane, in the same space. So we've got the preparations for the meal underneath where Babette is gathering the food from the boat, the turtle and the caged birds, and then we've got at the top the food laid out and then the people enjoying it in the background, like the Last Supper or something, but also the warmth of the feeling coming from eating. Yeah.
This figure in the corner.
Do you think it looks like you? No?
I was going to say Jesus. But
It's not, but it's the sister's father, and the feast is held as a kind of a celebration of him.
Oh, that's interesting.
That's why they're having a feast.
I just thought this figure of head with a halo around it, and it's
He was a very puritanical preacher, and then the two sisters kind of carry on maintaining some of the things that we used to do for the community.
It reminded me of the Last Supper, the kind of construction of it all. So I just assumed that was Christ at the end.
Does anybody have any particular questions about the work that's here before we take a break?
Can I ask something? There's lots of things I'd like to ask actually. Can you just tell us a little bit about your planning for the paintings? How do you do you have a method or is it always different?
Sometimes I will just have sketches in my sketchbook and notebooks. I'll keep lots of notebooks. I keep notebooks of my dreams. I just jot things down when I'm interested by something, and I save it for another a rainy day kind of idea. But then when I take an idea a bit more seriously, I'll do monoprints to work out colours, a range of colours, which I then might do a sequence of paintings using the same colour range to unite them, to keep them together. A lot of the work has been done over a few years, so I'll return to a theme. And it will resurface again many years later, sometimes, as the Dante's Inferno is something I started straight after art school when I did a scholarship to Italy, and saw the Dante work, and then it wasn't until 2 years ago that I produced the Dante's Inferno picture scroll.
There's the Chaucer upstairs with those great big drawings. Did you plan that triptych before you started the drawings, or did they develop as you did the drawings? Because presumably the drawings then led to the paintings.
Yeah, now that's an interesting thing, because I tried to do Canterbury Tales a very long time ago. Nothing came of it. But I had this book with little notes in the margins, and I decided to return to it after I'd done Dante. And I'd returned to that subject, so I returned to the Canterbury Tales and stuck with it and worked with it, because it was a very difficult story to get a hold of for me. But in the end, I thought, well, this is really about relationships that I can find in the world today too, and about fairy tales almost in relationships. So I had to find a way into it through drawing and then painting. Yeah.
So we can come back to after being upstairs. Are there any other? Yeah.
I'd love to ask you, I just love your work, and I saw the triptych that you had in the show about books last year, and I was so excited. That was my standout favourite
Jerusalem,
piece. Yes, absolutely. Another Blake connection. So I was so excited that you were having a solo show, and I didn't know your work before I saw that triptych. But having lived in Scotland myself, I know the work of Ken Curry very well, and I do see some big kind of echoes with Ken Curry's work. I mean, I'm thinking, for example, about Three Oncologists, which is in the National Portrait Gallery, and I'm kind of curious to hear maybe a little bit about your kind of formative experiences at the Glasgow School of Art, and whether there were tutors at that time who were kind of very passionate about narrative art, or if you see like that there was a kind of little school of you at that time who were kind of interested, because I'm very interested in how as artists we influence each other and how ideas kind of co-create and ferment. So I'd love to just hear a little bit about that.
Well, I think, as I said before, I was interested in narrative art, so that took me to Glasgow.
Okay.
I saw the Scottish figuration because I was going up and down to Glasgow to visit a boyfriend when I was doing my foundation course. And the Scottish figuration, at that time, Stephen Campbell, Ken Curry, Adrian Wisniewski, really wonderful, vivid, colourful images, and storytelling was important to them. And the story, the narrative, was where I wanted to place myself. And when I got there, I found that there was a lot of people using the same language, and I felt at home. And there was a very uninhibited way of painting. The things didn't have to be planned, actually. You could just work off the top of your head and just do. The whole thing was just in doing and using loads of colour and just an enjoyment, an uninhibited enjoyment of paint and creativity. And I was surrounded by it, and it was the best kind of experience I had to grow from. I was also working in the old Macintosh building, which in itself is quite monumental. Sadly, it's burnt to the grounds. And my tutor was Sandy Moffat. I was in Sandy Moffat's studio, and he was very much into finding people to find a voice through their art, I think. I think he was quite political, and he's done a lot of work with poets, but I think he was a great influence to me, and a great supporter of my work, and encouraged me to do many things and keep going. Yeah. What else about? And then I met Alison Harper, who is one of the Glasgow girls, and I became a Glasgow girl for a short time, and showed work with 3 or 4 women painters that came out of Scotland, and we used to show work together at the Boundary Gallery when Aggie Katz was alive. She was a great supporter of the work that we did together, and so I showed with them 3 times, and they've just recently had a show on their own. That's okay. But I did go and visit, so it was wonderful to see the girls and enjoy their work. And so yeah, we've had a friendship mainly with Alison, who also went to India, and I was in India at the same time, so we became connected, maintained that connection throughout our lives.
Debbie, that something strikes me, just it's quite interesting. You were there in an environment where there were lots of figurative painters, but that's not really the case in this part of the world. Have you found it strange, or has it been challenging in any way?
I think it has been challenging, because there are figurative painters, but they don't go wild with storytelling.
No.
So there's a few, and I'm trying to nurture those friendships. Yes.
You are. It just struck me that it must be so different for you now in this part of the world. Anyway, sorry, it's a thought. Okay. Are there any other questions now? Would you?
I've got a question about colour. So, Debbie, is your colour, is that an intuitive thing, or is that based on some theory, or?
I don't have a theory for colour, but as I suggested, I will choose a range of colours, and I will kind of censor my colour palette before I start a series of works. I'll either do that by monoprinting, or I'll do it by mark making with a range of colours in a very kind of childlike, abstract way, just so I get a different range of colours, and I'll have that pinned on my wall and stick to it for a particular painting, because otherwise I will go off and.
Right. And is that very mood based?
Mood based. Well, those two are very warm, hopefully very warm in colours. Yeah, I suppose because I want to create the warmth of nurturing and food and gathering people together. That's why I chose that kind of palette for them. So there is a reason, but it's very whimsical, I suppose. It's not, and then it becomes more meant as I work into it, and the kind of meaning grows as I tell myself more and more stories about the work that I'm doing while I'm working on it. And yeah, so the more and more stories then lead to more and more paintings, which means less and less
more
space.
How was that for you all? Did you enjoy it?
Hugely offended.
Well, that's good. Tell it.
Yeah, need a few fig leaves, I guess.
Okay, so Debbie, can you tell us, set some scene for the work upstairs? Let's move on to the storytelling.
The storytelling.
Yeah.
So, what really moves me to do my work is to find a narrative, and I'm inspired by fairy tales and songs and films. So they have a universal narrative, and within that I'll weave in my personal narratives, which are more about family life and loves and losses and all that goes into living, and also questioning about living and life and where the soul goes after life and things like that. That very much a questioning goes on in my work, especially with the storytelling work, and I use stories to help me investigate things that I'm thinking about and that I get obsessed by.
Right. So you've said something about the Chaucer before, and coming back to it several times. Am I right in thinking that the big Chaucer triptych and the smaller triptych that's in the corner, are they all based on Chaucer?
No, the smaller triptych in the corner of the upstairs gallery in the kind of turquoise green colours, that's based on David and Goliath. So it's a myth, and the kind of the shepherd that was slayed the giant and married the princess. And so it's also to do with a triumph over tyranny. So in my version, a woman slays the giant, and then there's a procession to the village in triumph. But the giant actually then becomes another character for me from another story. And the thing with stories is that you can retell the narrative 1,000 times and it can change and swap, and you can use narratives from other stories. And in that one I've used the Red Hand of Ulster, where two people are fighting over land, and one of them severs his hand off in order to reach the other side of the river before the other one can get there, in order to put claim on the land. And so that's where that story comes from. And then the giant you see in that painting is kind of in the stream, in the river, and the river is flowing around him. And that's just a thought that I had about the way rivers flow around things and then they come together again. So it's to do with relationship of flowing with the pipe. Rivers flow. I've lost my flow for a moment. But yeah. So there's all little incidents in that painting that happened just from around me. So there was a whole fleet of Chinook helicopters flew by one day. And, because we've got war in the background, I just thought, well, that's on my mind too. So they go into the painting. And then some troops, we've got Lulworth Cove is near where the army do their practicing. I can often hear them blowing things up. So war is never far from my mind. And so there's a little procession of army figures there. And then the circus came to town. So there's a circus tent comes into the painting. And somehow it just fits.
And there's, don't forget, the yellow bus.
The yellow bus, yes.
Don't spot the yellow bus.
Every morning I take my children to school. It's part of my routine. About 7 in the morning we catch the bus. Well, they catch the bus, the school bus. It's not a bright yellow bus, but I just changed it because I like the yellow bus. So I wanted everyone to know that it was a school bus, so the only kind of symbol of school bus is the American yellow bus, which people might twig is a school bus.
Is there a reason that you did 3 panels for that?
So the original Pisnalo painting is in the National Gallery, and it's on 2 panels. And I think it was a wedding present. It used to be on a chest, given to someone as a wedding present from the Medici family, I believe. So, although I've got those 2 tell the whole story, I decided I would take the whole story and put it into one painting. So it is that multiple narrative again, where the figures are created in one space. Also, I do love triptychs.
No.
And that can be placed in any configuration. It could be placed in the configuration of a cross with one side panel either side, or with the panels running along the bottom. But yes, as in a church or something.
Can you, I wondered if you could say something perhaps about the Angela Carter pieces. There are 2 in the room upstairs. There's Company of Wolves. And
one of my favourite stories, Company of Wolves.
Where are the lice?
Where are they?
Sorry. Glenn insisted on reading. Do you know the Company of Wolves?
It's the short story by Angela Carter. I think you've got a copy
we have.
in the gallery.
There's a particular passage where our heroine picks lice out of the wolf's ears and eats them. It's a great delight one morning reading that bit out. It's worth reading the story for those who haven't.
Well, gruesome. Even more gruesome than my painting.
That was an act of, she described it as an act of consummation. So when the 2 of them were getting together, his long tongue and she was picking nice things.
Oh, I see. So it's just they're so close
I thought it was lovely.
that they can be animalistic.
Yeah,
Um,
something like
but it's the animalistic thing that drew me to that story, to not illustrate it because they're not illustrations, so they're not being true to the story because they're changed and altered and distorted to my own stories in a way. But I'm very using the basic instincts, if you like, of that, of sexual drive, bestial, animal instinct. The woman is the Red Riding Hood figure is seducing the wolf man who is a wolf, and then you don't know whether he's a wolf until he's slain, because then he'll turn back. The person going around killing the wolves is collecting paws, but then he might slay someone who isn't a wolf, and they'd just be left as a man. So he might get it wrong. So who are we to judge who is a wolf and who's not a wolf?
well, I have no idea.
But I do like the idea of all these little bones under her pillow that she's sleeping on. I just think that's quite macabre. Oh, there's squirrels in my paintings nowadays, yeah. The Snow White thing going on with the squirrels.
Oh,
And a
really?
deer. In the Owl King, you can see even Bumper the rabbit makes an appearance whispering.
This is with going back to the
We're
Disney
upstairs,
influence.
yeah. Upstairs with the
Disney.
Owl King is the other Angela Carter stories.
Okay. I wonder if people have any questions that they'd like to ask before we let Debbie loose with her
Picture
picture
scrolls.
scrolls and things. Are there any questions you have about the work that's upstairs or anything else that occurs to you?
I should have a go. Can I?
Oh, Glenn said that you had questions. Well, he wouldn't tell me what they were, so I couldn't prepare
I could
for
boil
it.
it down to one. I
Okay.
could try. Yeah, I had a very interesting experience. Well, by the way, you know this idea of the genre that you say you see yourself as a narrative artist.
Yeah, I didn't realise I was, but I've come to know that about myself. That it's the story that makes me different to an artist who just does portraits or an artist that just does landscapes.
Yeah. I see that quite strongly. I mean, we all know that, like when Freud is painting a nude, he's not telling us a story. He's just presenting us with something that lives in that long tradition of painting of nudes of the body, and we compare it and look at it and assess it in those terms. I'm puzzled a little bit about the idea of a narrative painter, because I sort of think it's almost like a contradiction in terms. I can see a film being narrative. I can see a book being narrative, maybe even a dance. But a painting is like this sort of still, kind of fixed thing
So they might be
that has
the
no
middle.
time to
They
it.
might be the middle of the narrative. So you might think, I'll be doing a painting which is perhaps in the middle of the narrative. I'll be thinking, well, what came before that and what came after that? It will create a sequence of paintings or a set of paintings. Or I'll go into animation. And I think that's probably what took me into animation, really. Thinking about before and after the still image.
It's something quite
So
logical.
that there's a little screen here which shows an animated arm wrestle. I'm really interested in very small movements that get repeated, that I can loop. So what comes before and after that movement of the couple there. And there's a drawing there where they're passing, and man and woman are passing straight through each other and passing through the wall. So I'm interested in just that very simple movement of changing places with another person. At one point they become both male and female, and then they drift into the other side of the screen and come back again. And this image here, it's just one image, but if you look on the screen, I've created an animation of it, so many things happen. and I will kind of erase and redraw figures just in one picture to create a series of movements in the animation that I'm quite interested in.
That's interesting. There's a lot, I suppose I sense that as being a small part of what you're doing, but the bulk of the work that I've seen here seems to be, of course, in that tradition of the still, the single image. But I've been puzzling a lot about myself, trying to figure like a kind of a genre that I could put you into. I kind of went back to the idea of being an illustrator, but not an illustrator in the traditional sense, which is always the person who kind of has the prearranged work, the work that comes beforehand, which you then illustrate. I see you as being an illustrator of your kind of your own world. It's like you're the director of a movie, which is your life, and those extraordinary experiences are going on. There are children here, some helicopters going by, the school bus that you thought of this morning. All these elements are suddenly being illustrated out in this kind of moment that becomes sort of fixed somehow in this final work. There lies it, because I suppose I don't. This is kind of becomes a fixed thing now, but it's come out of a whole sequence of events that were sort of melanged into your mind. I mean, it's like it could be of a day. You may have read some Chaucer, you may have got into reading the Goliath, David and Goliath myth. And as you see, you've seen your kids off to school, there's a school bus. So all these things are kind of coagulating, maybe that's a good word, into a kind of image. But I don't particularly know what's come before or where they're going. And that creates a kind of something that I think leads to a very curious question. And this idea that we've already touched on tonight about the idea of interpretation. And I had a kind of really curious experience on the night of the private view, and I was kind of wandering around. And I realised that I don't put interpretations on things. If I don't know what's going on in the picture, I'm not going to interpret it. I don't feel that's my job. I was having a lovely time anyway, because I mean, I was just enjoying the formal qualities of your work, which I think are gorgeous and stunning, and I love them, and they're enough to hold me. But then a little voice in my brain says, yeah, what's it about? And another little voice in my brain says, I don't know, but I like it. So I kind of move on to something else and have the same experience. I got to the end of that corridor and there's this fabulous painting, which I still love. It's a big version of that print on the wall behind you. So there is this figure with the lampshade on. And I loved it because I love the colours, the flesh tones, beautiful. And my brain is saying, what's it about? And my other part of my brain is saying, oh, no, but you know, that's never mind. Somebody joined me at that moment and suggested an interpretation, which was actually really quite dark. And I was quite shocked by that. And my brain went into gear and said, well, hang on a minute, I wouldn't normally come up with the interpretation, but as you've suggested that, what do I think about it? I reacted strongly against it. And I came up with my own personal interpretation. And it was completely different, but I also realised it came from my own sort of background. I used to be a fashion photographer, so I still kind of look at images like that. So I sort of saw a figure of a person who had put a lampshade on their head, which struck me as being very whimsical. And didn't have any clothes on either, so it was a kind of a fabulous fashion shot where a kind of naked figure, which was actually quite young, had put a lampshade on their head. And so it struck me as being very light and whimsical and playful, and I liked it because of that. But I got to realise, actually I have no idea whether that's got anything to do with it or not. We've got two entirely opposing interpretations. I thought, really? It's not, I think where I come from, I don't think it's for me to decide what that work is about. So there's a kind of an impasse there.
But I think it is up to me to interpret the work. I can look at that,
We
no
don't
idea
always
what
have
you're
the
doing,
artist
and
there to
I can
say.
construct my own story.
Yeah, you can, but you are not getting what the... surely, so let me ask this question. Surely there is something that work is about.
An absolute.
As it comes from the artist. I don't know what that
Yeah,
is.
but I might have my interpretation, but it's open to other interpretations. completely.
Well, if you don't then at that point, aren't we making the art? You're just suggesting some. It's like when a cook puts a chicken on some potatoes on the table, and they say make whatever you like of that. Or I could have fried chicken and chips.
But maybe it's many things. Maybe it's not just one thing.
I think it's probably many things anyway. I think even as far as it comes from Debbie, it could be many things. But it's the many things that come through. I think I want.
But you all bring something to everything.
But I want to see the world through your eyes. I think that's what I want from an artist. I want to kind of get into your world and see things from you. This is what we call empathy. And that's why movies work. That's why, we don't go to the cinema and watch film about Mary Poppins and say, wow, that was all about war in Vietnam. Because I think that's what it's about. It's like we are all capable of empathy. But I need some help. The question is, it's up to you. You're the artist. I came away from that painting thinking, I don't know what's about. Somebody else says it's...
Just ask me what it was about.
Well, that's what it comes to.
You don't want to know.
No.
Unless you got the artist standing there, you can't do that.
Yeah, you can't.
And I am seeing what you saw through your eyes, but I don't want to be in your head thinking about what you were thinking about at the time. It's my interpretation from there. And if I were to buy this one, and I didn't bring my wallet, so I'm not going to. I could have that on my wall, and I could spin loads of stories about what's going on. That's the excitement about the pictures.
So they're living things.
Yeah.
They're kind
Yeah.
of just.
Okay, I'm going to profoundly disagree with all of you.
They're not just animated
All right then, while we're on the subject, what is that picture about? Tell me what you feel that you were saying.
To me, it was about being a piece of furniture, a lampstand, not being noticed, feeling like just a piece of furniture. Also, thinking about she's very like a guard or a sentinel, something protective by the bed. I don't know, she's just standing there. So, as I'm painting it, I'd be thinking something else like that. Or then I think, well, in the animation, she gets turned on and turned off again. So there's something about that, the lamp that goes, the lamp light that is turned on and off, and that has sexual connotations to it. And then there was another layer that was to do with,
One night stand.
One night stand, that's right. It's all right. I'm glad I forgot that one. That's great.
Explain
Yeah.
yes.
Then it's to do with the personal meaning of, this is how you feel when you're a one night stand. So so there was
All right, so if I came up with a completely different interpretation about that, how do you feel about that? If I said, no, I'm not getting any of that. If I said, this is what I see, do you feel that you haven't managed to communicate with me, or do you not care?
People seeing it, I'm glad that they see something in it that they
If somebody said, wow, it's really dark, that's about child sexual abuse, are you happy with that?
But that's your mind.
No, that's not in mine, but that was suggested to me.
Well, it's somebody's mind.
It was somebody, it wasn't mine. I saw something young and free and very playful, just a kid playing a dress up. That's what I saw. So I haven't seen any of the stuff that you have put into it. So I feel that I haven't got it.
Gosh. Fascinating debate.
But you're a different person, so you can't.
Well, we all are. But the artist is telling us something, and none of us have got it. None of us. I doubt anybody knew that.
Playfulness is there.
Some of us.
What you
some
saw,
of
the
us.
playfulness, is part of what I do. Putting on a disguise. In fact, I've got a head to put on. Well, that was in case. Do you mind if I show one of my scrolls?
Yes,
Because I think we're probably running out of time.
I think we should.
And I can't
this is
remember
where
the
it gets
two.
Whiskey.
Okay, so this is a story about how the scrolls came into being. And I've mentioned that I went to Italy and I was inspired by Dante's Inferno, that was in Florence. I was staying in Florence. It was a John Kinross scholarship from the Royal Scottish Academy. And then many years later, I went to India, and I worked with this wonderful group of tribal painters. And this is an original from that tribe that we made together as I learned the process of their storytelling. And they made these using the plants that they grew, and they would unroll them and sing a story. So I thought, with the one that we did together, I would bring a story from a different village. And in that village I'd been staying in, first of all, a woman was seduced by a man, and she became pregnant, and she went to the medicine person, and they got rid of the baby. And that man went on to seduce another woman, and she became pregnant, but he left her with a child to earn money, and then she dropped a brick on her foot and wasn't able to earn money anymore. And so there she is with her children, and the man has gone away. And that was a story that a young woman told me in one village. And so I did the drawings, and we painted it together in the evenings. And then in the morning, the patois would bring their story scrolls to me. And what the thing about patois painters is that they sing when they're unrolling their stories. So this one is the Dante's Inferno that we've got upstairs. So that was in 1995 that I was in India studying scrolls, and I've often done scrolls off and on throughout those years up until now. But it wasn't until recently when I got a scholarship, a bursary, to afford to print this scroll in lithograph, which combined the two areas of research. The research I did in Italy with the research I did in India, and the storytelling, which I'm always doing. And so I created Dante's scroll in lithography. So I'm going to try and sing it to you.
The whole
if I can remember
Inferno.
Tune. Maybe you can kind of guess what tune I'm going to use. No, I'm going to try and do it myself, just like the patois. So I don't usually sing them, although I have in the past. And when I do that, I usually wear a head. But I'm not going to wear a head. I'm going to do it without a head.
Oh.
So Dante was in the woods, and he was in midlife and met the wild animals. But Beatrice said, "Don't worry, because you'll be fine, and I'll send you a guide in the name of Virgil." So he trampled through the forest, and he saw the plague victims and the pestilence, and the baby who was unbaptized in limbo, and Minos judging people and throwing them to different pockets of hell. Whew, there we go. Not going to sing anymore.
If you did miss these lithographs,